We just really do appreciate all that you do for us. Your prayers, your love, and your financial support. It means so much to us. And we're having our 25th anniversary next year.
Wow.
So we were looking back, and it's like we've had like 96 baptisms over that 25 years. Which, in Japan, that's quite a bit, But this year we've really focused on the young people, and we've been able to start reaching out to a campus university, international campus university. And so little by little we're trying to make inroads into there. And this year has been all about being unashamed of the gospel, and just the youth having that confidence of being unashamed of who they are in God and being able to share that with others.
Good.
And as I said, we've been here, as Pastor Cameron said, 25 years, and sometimes you wonder, am I making any difference? And it can be tiring at times, just wondering, am I making any difference? But God keeps reminding me of a prophetic word that we've received so many times. It's in Hebrews 10, 36 to 39. It says, "For you have need of endurance, so after you have done the will of God, you may receive the promise. For yet a little while, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry. Now the just shall live by faith, but if anyone draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who draw back to perdition, but of those who believe to the saving of the soul." Yeah. And that has kept us through these 25 years. And we can't express how much we appreciate your standing with us and being faithful over that whole 25 years that we've been there. You as a church and as a leadership have supported us, and it means more than anything that we can express here today. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for sending the team this year again. Everybody that was so excited to have the team from here in November. So I just want to thank you for coming again.
All right. Today we're continuing our series. It's really the continuation of the year-long series on spiritual growth. And we've talked through the upward journey, which we started with the inward journey, and then went on to the out. How could I get three things mixed up? All right, the inward journey, the upward journey, and then the outward journey. We're now talking about the outward journey. Wow, that was hard. The outward journey is just as important to our spiritual growth as the inward and the upward. And a lot of times we don't think that. We think that it's about inward stuff, getting healed up, getting sanctified, getting over sin and overcoming issues in our own life, and upward journey, getting to know God. And it's all absolutely true. But those things are meant to equip and empower us for the rest of it, which is getting out, fulfilling the mission that we're called to do. I was thinking about this last night. I was like, a lot of people think the Bible is a self-help book, okay? And Christianity is just about making you better. That's really misunderstanding. The Bible isn't a self-help book, all right? In fact, the Bible tells you can't help yourself. You need a deliverer. You need someone to kick the wall down, like we sang a few minutes ago, to climb the mountain. When you're stuck, when you're in sin, when you're alone, when you're separated from God, you can't save yourself. You need someone to rush in and help. And so not to pray, God, I need help. I need a deliverer. And so the outward journey is about us being used by God to go out and take or give away what we've received through the faith and through the free gift of what God's poured out. Our theme verse is found in John. Jesus said, "Peace to you, as the Father has sent me, I also send you." Wow. As the Father sent me, I send you. And we need to realize that we are being sent by Jesus the same way he was sent by the Father. We've been talking about what that means. From the moment he was born, really even before that, he was sent. And so every aspect of his life was being sent. And right before he said that to his disciples, he showed them the hands and the side. As a very graphic reminder that, hey guys, this means suffering. But also means resurrection power. Right? And so all of that taken together is the reason or the energy, the motivation behind us being sent out, us going out. And today we're going to talk about church as part of this outward journey and church as mission. And specifically, we're taking the whole month of October to talk about different aspects of church. This is what we're doing right now, but really everything that is involved in being a church is mission. And we see this by looking at stories. We look at a number of stories in the book of Acts as a template for how God wants church to be conducted, for the purpose, and seeing it as, wow, this is really about the mission. A lot of people think missions is something separate. Outreach is something separate. And then you go in churches like, oh, this is for us, and we do stuff for the world. But really, church is God's means for accomplishing the Great Commission. That's the big idea for this whole month. Church is God's means for accomplishing the Great Commission. Christianity is not an individualistic approach to God. Yes, we need to be saved as individuals. There needs to be a moment where you have a conversion, where you realize Jesus is your Lord, you ask Him into your heart. Right? But that is just one little piece of the picture. And that actually is the birth. Everybody is born, right? I think that's universally true. At some point, a person is born. That's an individual experience, sort of. But mom's there, and dad was involved, and they're born into a family, especially when it's done healthfully. They're born into a family that you nurture. And I believe that there's a reason. My granddaughter was here just a minute ago. She's around back there. There's a reason that, the first few months, a baby can't do anything. They die within hours if not cared for. And it takes almost a year before they can even walk. And it takes decades, really, before they can, most of them, provide for themselves. Now, we had horses when I was growing up, and I remember seeing the horse born, and within minutes, the horse is running around. Minutes! You don't have to teach a horse how to eat. You just know how to do it. And so we're different. We're humans. We're called to something much more. Church is a community, and so being born as a Christian means being born into this community, this faith community. And this faith community has an identity and has ways of being together. In Acts, we see this new community, this what we call the church, birth, and we see how it's figured out. They figure out how to live in this new community. And there's some figuring out. There's some struggles that they encounter. We're going to talk about a few of those today. And it sets us, gives us a pattern that God wants us to continue living out. And it's been working for 2,000 years. Don't let anybody tell you the church isn't working. Okay? Individual churches may have struggles. We all do. But the church overall is working phenomenally. More people are being saved worldwide now than ever in recorded history. Over 170,000 people a day. The people who study these things are coming to the Lord. And they're coming to the Lord to be joined to the church. So the outward journey was never meant to be taken alone. This is not a solo trek. This is not grabbing a backpack and hiking the Appalachian Trail. That might be great and romantic, and you can do that. And there's times when you go out on your own, but the outward journey is a trip that was intended to be walked out in community, in a group. It's absolutely essential, and that's what we're going to really stress. So here's the first story, very famous verse about the church. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So this is after Jesus lived and was crucified, buried, and then resurrected and ascended. And then after Pentecost, Graham's actually going to be teaching about that next week, the birthing and the authority of the church. This is after that. And so this is what Peter had already preached, Pentecost message, and thousands of people had come to the Lord. And this is kind of the concluding statement. It wraps up. It gives us a snapshot of the early church, the first century church. It says, all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the sharing of meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them. And the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. I accidentally pushed the button. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes at the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. Each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. So this little snapshot, this little summary of what was happening is really the outline that the church has used ever since to say, this is it, man. This is the ideal. It was this that changed the world. And so we look at this description of how church functioned and say all the essential ingredients of church is found right in this little passage. We're going to talk through quickly some of those defining characteristics. It says they all continued, they all were devoted to these things. And so devotion, or continuing steadfastly together as a group, is an essential aspect of the church being the church. It has to be done individually. You know, if we are to be devoted, that means you need to be devoted, right? Say, I need to be devoted.
I need to be devoted.
Right? And together, when we're devoted to the same things together, then you heard the word synergy. That's when the output or the production of numerous people or forces coming together has a greater impact than each person operating individually, separately. But when we work together, there's that synergy, that combined energy that creates greater output, greater momentum. And so, yes, you need to be personally devoted, but they were devoted together. They all continued steadfastly. They were all devoted to that. And so devotion is a key element, attribute for the church. They were devoted to the apostles' teaching. I love the way this is said, and you may not have taught this or thought about this, but I do this for a living. And so I think about this stuff a lot. It doesn't just say they were devoted to the Bible or to God's Word, right? Even though that's what the apostles were teaching. It says that later. We'll get to that. They were devoted to the apostles' teaching. But the reason I think this is really important is that they were going and listening to specific people teach. They knew who their leaders were. They knew Peter. They knew James. Right? Andrew. They knew these guys. Thomas. And they were devoted to hearing their leaders teach the Scripture. Right? And so that's discipleship. They were devoted to discipleship. Devoted to learning from individuals God's Word. Yes, you can study the Bible. That's part of what they taught, and that's part of what we teach. Okay? But quite frankly, it's not enough just to study the Bible on your own. Unfortunately, there's a plague in Christianity. I call it a plague intentionally. There are millions upon millions of Christians that think churches doesn't mean anything anymore. You know, you can go online and listen to some of the best communicators in the world. And I encourage you to do that, because I do it. There are way better communicators than I am, or I ever will be. But that's not church.
That's right.
That person is not going to be able to see me and look me in the eyes, or notice whether I've listened to his podcast this week. They have no idea I even exist. I'm just a number. X number, click number 1 million. And then the reverse is even more important. When you're part of a church, when you're receiving teaching, when you come and listen to my teaching, that edifies me. It's like Dennis said, it can be discouraging after 25 years. Am I having any fruitfulness? Well, it's your lives being transformed that transforms my lives. And he says, yeah, wow, when we work together, it has greater impact. All right, fellowship. Oh, I have taught whole sermons, I've taught whole series on this, but I can only speak 1 minute on it. It's that great Greek word, koinonia, which means partnership, participate, joint participation. We fellowship. It's not just hanging out and having coffee. That's part of it. It's doing life together, giving your part. You're bringing something to this. Every time you come to church, even if you're new, you're just coming and checking us out. You're bringing something because you are building community. And the more you get involved, the more you participate and have that joint partnership, and that causes the growth. It makes the church more effective in fulfilling our mission, the Great Commission. Just like we fellowship with Izu, every nation in Izu, their church in Japan, we can fellowship across 12-hour time zones. Because we're in unity with them. We can fellowship with the congregations in Vandalia, but we can fellowship, we work jointly to reach our world with the gospel. Sharing meals, it seems simple, but it's so powerful. And of course that means celebrating communion. Breaking of bread is how it's translated in the King James. And it just means, it can refer to the breaking of bread in the communion service, but it also just means eating together and doing life together. And that's so absolutely essential. The early church, as Hebrews, if they're raised a Hebrew, if they became a Christian, they were kicked out of their natural family. All right? And so the church then, fellow believers, became, in a very, very powerful way, their family. And in the same way, you all, in many ways, are more a family to me than my natural family. Because I do life with you. You know, my siblings live in other states. I hardly ever see them. You know, but I see you guys every week, hopefully. Prayer. Yes, they prayed individual, but again, this is talking about corporate prayer. And so corporate prayer is an essential. When we worship, we have a time of prayer and service, but also our worship nights have corporate prayer integrated into them. When we pray together in small groups, prayer is an essential part. Individual prayer, Jesus said, yeah, go in your closet and pray. That's absolutely important, but you're also called to pray together. And that changes things. And so prayer is an absolute essential part of the New Testament church. And this is one a lot of people overlook or forget or think, oh, this was just for when the apostles were around, but it hasn't changed. There needs to be awe, and there needs to be signs and wonders.
That's right.
And I believe that is as much for today as it ever was, because nowhere in the Bible does it say it's supposed to end. We are to pray for the sick and see them healed. And so we do that. We do that when we go out in the streets. We do that when we pray for people after the service. When we visit people in the hospital, we pray and we believe for healing. And thankfully, we do see many healings. I want to see a lot more. And that's why we hang around people like Josh, who was here last week, and sees people raised from the dead and blind eyes open. That's great. It's an essential. In fact, you can't be a New Testament church unless there's some aspects of signs and wonders happening in your midst. Right? And again, even in Acts, it ebbs and flows. There were times where there were a lot of miracles, and then there were times where they were just plugging away and doing the stuff. And then there'd be a revival. When Paul was in Ephesus, there was a revival. That's when so many people were being healed in an unusual way. It actually says people were being healed in an unusual. That means it was not usual. It wasn't normal. To the point where he would just touch a Kleenex, and they'd take the Kleenex to another city, touch the sick person, and they'd get healed. Right? That's unusual. It was unusual in the first century because the Bible said it. But you know what? It happens. Right? And we can believe for that today. Radical generosity. Radical generosity. They shared everything, selling stuff in order to give to any with need. And here we have a great example that they saw one another as family, to the point where if there was someone that had a need, boy, they wouldn't even think about it. They would sell the stuff. If they had stuff they didn't need, they'd sell it and pool their resources to meet the needs of the congregation, to meet one another's needs. They were worshiping together in the temple, and they met in homes. And again, this is controversy. Some churches, is the mega churches, they're not real churches, or you need to meet in homes. I'm like, I don't understand why anybody would even have that argument, right? Because in the Bible, they did both.
Yeah.
Okay, where these people were meeting was actually a part of the temple called Solomon's Porch, and it could hold up to 10,000 people. And at times it was filled. Right? That's where a lot of the healings happened. And so that was when they gathered in celebration. I mean, the first service in the church at Pentecost, 3,000 people got saved. 3,000 people don't fit in a house. So it could have been just houses. And it says, they met in the temple that could hold thousands and in homes. All right? And so home church is just as legitimate as a mega church, and vice versa. The point is that we're worshiping together. That's the point. And a few other things. They were praising God. They had a lifestyle of continual worship. And it says, each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. And I like how it's phrased here, because salvation is defined as directly connected to being added to the fellowship. All right? God was adding to this new community. As people got saved, they entered into the community. So you don't have this idea of people just getting saved and then eventually someday becoming part of the church, maybe. All right? It's the same event. All right? When people get saved, they get plugged in. Why? Just like a human baby can't just be born and say, okay, hope you have a nice life. No, they need to be nurtured and cared for. All right? Until they can come to the fullness of what God wants. All of those characteristics and all the others about what church is about requires a community. You can't have a corporate permitting alone. Right? You can't gather and worship alone. And so this whole idea of community, it's essential that we see that all of Christianity is meant to be practiced in community. And it was this incredible form of community that enabled the gospel to have such a powerful impact in that first century. And we see in the book of Acts, the gospel, over a period of approximately 50 years that's covered through the reading through the book of Acts, spread from a sect of Judaism that ended up being persecuted and eventually becoming a worldwide phenomenon, all the way to Rome. And the entire, during that time we don't record of it, but it spread all through North Africa and into Asia. And so we saw it just explode. Why? Because they were this powerful community. Jesus said, they will know you're Christians by your love. Right? And so that loving relationship of community is what attracted the attention of people on the outside. But we have to understand that the purpose for that community is the outward journey, is to attract those people. And not to hide from those people. Right? But you know what? This community wasn't without problems. We're going to talk about a few of those problems. There was a certain man named Ananias. This happened early in the church. Everybody was, not everyone, many people were donating everything, selling property, and just bringing it and laying it at the feet of the apostles. So it just kind of became a routine event. I don't think they probably did a faith raiser promotion like we did. But it was the same idea. People were bringing money and giving it to the apostles, giving it to the church to be distributed. But a man named Ananias, who with his wife Sapphira, sold some of the property. He brought part of the money to the apostles, claiming it was the full amount. With his wife's consent, he kept the rest. And Peter said, Ananias, why have you let Satan fill your heart? You lied to the Holy Spirit, and you kept some of the money to yourself. The property was yours to sell or not sell, as you wished. Just the point, they weren't living in a commune, which requires joint ownership of everything. very clear here. The property was yours to sell as you wished. And then after selling it, the money was also yours to give away. But he wasn't compelled to give it away. What he did was he gave it away saying it was the whole amount, but actually it was a part of the amount. He lied. How could you do this thing? You weren't lying to us, but to God. As soon as Ananias heard these words, he fell to the floor and died. That was a great church service. Everyone who heard about it was terrified. Then some young men got up, wrapped him in a sheet, and took him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, "Well, what was the price you and your husband received for your land? Was this the price you and your husband received for the land?" "Yeah," she said, "that was the price." And Peter said, "How could you two even think of conspiring to test the Spirit of the Lord? The young men who buried your husband are just outside the door, and they will carry you out too." Instantly, she fell to the floor and died. And the young men came and saw that she had died. Isn't this just a great story? They carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear gripped the entire church and everyone who heard what was happening. He continued on. The apostles were performing many miraculous signs and wonders among the people, and all believers were meeting regularly at the temple in the area known as Solomon's Colonnade or Porch. But no one else dared them, even though all the people had high regard for them. Yet more and more people believed and were brought to the Lord, crowds of both men and women. I want to know, why in the heck is this story in the Bible? Have you ever wondered that? It's like, to me, this really proves that this is not a myth made up to sell a package. Because to me, that's not a good selling point. It's like, they were having church service and someone drops over dead after the offering. And then they tell about it. And his wife comes in, and she drops over dead. I mean, what in the world is going on here? How does that integrate with the good news of the message? Have you ever wondered that? Have you ever read over that story? What in the heck? Okay, read the next passage. Let's move on. Let's not even think about that. No, actually, not very many sermons are preaching about this. But you know what? It was a defining event for the early church. It's really important. That's why it's in the Bible. It's really important. It's really, really important that we understand what this is saying about the church. This happened in church, and it forcefully sets a tone. It communicates that this new community has boundaries. Right? And it has God-given authority. Peter didn't kill him.
Right.
All right? God allowed them to die because they had lied. And it was something to clarify, listen, this is not a free-for-all. You can't, you're not giving money just to be to raise your social status. So everybody thinks you're a hotshot. You can't lie about it. Lying was not tolerated, as well as many other behaviors. It powerfully positions the church and the church leaders as the representation of God. Okay? You weren't lying to us, but to God. And so this is very similar. We just have a couple of stories like this in Acts. Very similar to the trials that the Israelites had when they were journeying through the wilderness. One time the ground opened up and swallowed thousands of them.
Right.
They were on the way to the promised land, but they had to sort out issues. Why? Because they were becoming a new community. By the time they get to the promised land, they needed to be different people. So there has to be events that shape that community. And this is one of the events that shape the community of the church. And listen, this is this is a sacred gathering. I like that statement that says, no one dared to join them. Okay? But then the next sentence says, yet more and more people believed and were added to the church. I know. So people talk about conflicts, contradictions in the Bible. They generally don't know where the real ones are. But what does this say? No one dared to join them, but more and more people were added to the church. And that said, there was a fear that came on people. And so there was a reverence, and no one would lightly or presumptuously become part of the church. Oh yeah, I'm part of that church. There are, oh man. If you're going to be part of that, you need to be fully committed. Did you hear the story when that guy lied? Oh, he lied. Yeah, what happened? He died. He died? Break me a little, break me. The young guy carried him out, and then his wife came in, she died. There's their grave right there. Well, yet, I think it's because of those healthy boundaries, it actually enabled the church to grow. Right? Because the people that did join were joining with that understanding that there has to be full buy-in. Okay? Full buy-in. But when you fully buy in, then what happens is many people believe, crowds come, both men and women, and that's why we need buy-in. But that growth actually resulted in some more problems. Let's read about that. The high priest, the church was growing so fast, so rapidly, so many people were. Keep in mind, it's possible they were doing that activity of bringing the money. We don't know for sure, but that could have happened in Solomon's porch, which is part of the temple complex. So they could have been, the priests were in a different part, a higher part of the temple. And so the priests, when they were doing their priestly duties, which are still going on at the same time, could look out and see, oh my goodness, there's a crowd of thousands over there, and there's Peter, and geez, they're bringing a whole bunch of money to Peter. And the apostles and the priests are over here going, what's going on over there? All right? And to the point where they got jealous. So the high priest and his officials, who were Sadducees, were filled with jealousy. And so they arrested the apostles and put them in public jail. But an angel of the Lord came at night, opened the gates of the jail, and brought them out. Then he told them, go to the temple and give, the angel told Peter and the apostles, go to the temple and give the people this message of life. All right? The community begins to come under attack, and it just increases. Stephen gets stoned a few chapters later. This opposition from the culture is beginning, and they're under attack from the established religious leaders, and they also had civil authority because they could have them arrested, have them jailed, have them beaten. But God intervenes, and an angel comes, opens up the prison doors and says, get back out there. Go back out. The people need to hear this wonderful news, this message of life. Go back out there. Get back on the journey. All right? Get back on the outward journey. Unfortunately, it didn't take long. That same day, when the leaders came to get the disciples out of prison, the prison doors were still locked. The guards were outside the doors. They opened the prison. Nobody was there. They don't know what happened, but they say, hey, they're preaching out in the temple. So they went and got them, and the story continues. It says, they brought the apostles before the high council, where the high priest confronted them. Didn't we tell you never again to teach in this man's name? He demanded. Instead, you have filled all Jerusalem with your teaching about him, and you want to make us responsible for his death. But Peter and the apostles replied, we must obey God rather than any human authority. The church had to learn how to deal with a culture that was in opposition. And in this case, it meant they were arrested, they were put in jail, God delivered them, but they ended up being beaten, and the council said, you got to be careful here. The crowds, there's so many of them, we can cause a riot. So they beat the apostles and said, don't talk about Jesus anymore. But they went out and did what they knew they had to obey God to do. The outward journey, this idea of getting what God's given us to the streets, to the people in our lives, is such a vital aspect of this community that they willingly stood up to opposition and joyfully endured persecution. After they were beaten, the apostles, the Bible says that they were honored to have endured shame.
for the gospel's sake. So let's just think for a minute. Is there opposition to church? Is there opposition to biblical living in our day? Yeah, there is. You know, there's a friend of mine who's in prison in Turkey simply for being a Christian. But here, you know, people think, you know, we're, you know, call Christians' name, and there's pushback, and we try to live a life that lives to a standard the Bible calls us to. You know, don't preach to me. So that's the opposition. You know, the opposition is a little more subtle in America, but we may be approaching a time where it gets more in your face. All right? We need to be willing, just like the early church needed to be willing to realize it's worth it.
Yes.
It's worth it to overcome the fear of rejection of others in order to preach the message of the gospel of the truth. And then there's one more challenge we're going to look at before we finish up. But as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 called a meeting of all the believers. They said, we apostles should spend our time teaching the Word of God, not running a food program. And so brothers, select 7 men who are well respected and full of the spirit of wisdom, and we will give them this responsibility. Then we apostles can spend our time in prayer and teaching the Word. All right, there was complaining in church. Can you believe that? Who would have thought? Complaining in church? Really? There was division between 2 ethnic groups. Right? There's accusations. We're not being treated fairly. A lot of people idealize the first century church. Oh, if we could just be like the early church, everything would be better. And I'm like, have you read Acts? There was complaining. There was discontent. Right? There was divisions. There was ethnic separation and discrimination. There was lying. People dropping dead in church. Is that what you want? When I read it, it's the same church that I live in. It's the same church. Well, thankfully, no one's dropped dead in church. Did you say no yet? Oh, hallelujah. No, what I'm trying to get at is that nothing's changed. People haven't changed. The essential nature of people. You know, complaining in church, and don't be discouraged by that. That's normal. It's biblical. You shouldn't do it, right? But don't be surprised when someone else is complaining that, oh, they're not being fairly treated or whatever. And what it does is it led to the creation of structure, right? So they had to figure out how to respond to this problem. And what they did was they established a structure which enabled more to be done. They wanted a food program. They had a food program. It's a good thing to have a food program. It's distribute food. But we needed someone else, another layer of leadership. And in order for people to be treated well, in order for the leaders to do what they were called to do, which was prayer and the Word of God. And so this story, actually, this problem that the early church encountered, the same thing when we have problems in the church today, those are opportunities to define the community better so that we can be better equipped and better empowered to get the job done. That's right. All right? To get the job done, which is reaching the world. Okay? Taking what God's given us and getting it out there. And so this is the story. This is why we have different levels of leadership in the church. And for 2,000 years, this has affected how churches are structured. And it's a template for the outward journey that we must work together in order to advance. If they had to solve this problem, it would have they would have fractured and divided and the momentum would have been lost. But they were willing to come up with a solution so that those who were called to preaching and prayer could focus on that, and they could still meet the needs of the widows, and they could have a food distribution problem. And those people who were selected, one of them was Stephen, who ended up become a powerful preacher, and was martyred for the gospel. This is exactly what Paul was talking about in Ephesians chapter 4, where he says, these gifts which are the gifts Christ gave to the church, and then he lists the key leadership roles in the church: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do the work and build up the church, the body of Christ. And it goes on and says, he makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. So every kind of growth, and this is numeric growth. We're having a baptism service in a few weeks. We're having a baptism service at Vine, too. The first one at Vine. I'm excited about that. Actually, they have baptisms outdoors, but we're going to do it indoors during a service. I think the week before we do it here. Yeah, praise God. So numeric growth, spiritual growth, people coming from infancy in their faith to maturity in their faith, individual growth as a group. Every form of growth is really dependent on living in a healthy community. And it's when we're practicing this healthy community, we become and we are able to fulfill our mission as the church. So we look at a few snapshots and review them quickly. The church was birthed in unity and with purpose, and they did all those things we listed in Acts 2:42. Then they had some problems come up, Ananias and Sapphira, lying, and the establishment of boundaries of authority, boundaries of behavioral boundaries, opposition from culture, being arrested, and the pushback that they saw that, and they responded by standing up to that opposition and not being shut down by it, but actually being encouraged by it and being energized by it. We saw the snapshot of the division over the distribution of food and leadership being established and learning how to order and structure church life in this community so that everybody's needs can be met. Through all of these, the church, that early fledgling church, had to figure it out. And they kept moving forward. But the motivation was to continue to preach the gospel. It always goes back to preaching the gospel. All right? Reaching new people. Planting churches. And seeing lives changed. And I just encourage you right now, let's take it just a few seconds. And maybe identify some area that's limiting you. We saw a few that limited the church. Think of something that's limiting you or this church in being effective in the outward journey. If you can, write it down. Maybe there's one or two, or maybe this afternoon, think about, is it governmental opposition? Well, we don't see that here in the States much, but it's really true in other places. Cultural, ethnic, racial opposition, yeah, we see that a lot. There's barriers that we have to overcome. Financial, how are we going to deal with money? Is that a pain point in your outward journey? Well, I don't have time. Maybe it's time. Or can you restructure your life so that the time is used to accomplish the mission? So let's just take those things to the Lord. Whether you've identified them now or you do it this week, this is what I want you to identify this week. It's the application. Find, identify where the sticking point is in your outward journey. You can't get over this mountain. You can't manage this. You can't navigate through this maze. Life, maybe an issue in your life. You've gone so far, but you really haven't been effective in reaching the lost. How can this church see souls added daily? How can we have a baptism service at least once a month instead of a few times a year? That's what I want to see. Why aren't we doing that? There's reasons.